Your loyalty doesn't pay bills, Vincent. Blake Hendricks delivered it with a thin, self-satisfied smile that made my fingers curl into fists beneath the polished conference table. The executive room smelled like stale coffee and expensive cologne. 8 minutes into a meeting that wasn't a meeting at all, 15 years of my life were being reduced to an exit schedule. Kyle, Blake's 28-year-old nephew, stood in the doorway pretending to be casual, eyes already sweeping the room like he was choosing furniture. Fresh from a failed tech startup, he looked at my office like it was a prize. I'd built Apex Construction's entire project management infrastructure. I'd kept us alive through the 2020 crisis when everyone else was ready to fold. I'd worked Christmas weeks while Blake posted Aspen photos. None of it mattered now. My name is Vincent Kane. I'm 56 years old, and for 15 years I treated this company like it was my own, because at one point, it practically was. I signed documents most executives wouldn't dare touch. I absorbed risks no one else wanted. I believed loyalty was equity. Blake slid a severance package across the table. 3 months' salary. Sign the NDA. Be gone by 5. His confidence wasn't the confidence of someone making a difficult decision. It was the confidence of someone who believed consequences were for other people. My voice stayed level. I asked one question. What about the Wellington loan? Blake waved it off like it was dust. Handled. Don't worry about things above your pay grade. Above my pay grade. I stood, gathered my leather portfolio, and walked out. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. As I passed security, the voicemail notification lit up. Blake thought he'd cut me loose. He didn't realize he'd cut the line holding his future in place. I sat in my car as rain drummed the windshield, then finally hit play. Mr. Kane, this is Laura Bennett from First Continental Bank regarding your personal guarantee on the $47 million Wellington Street development. We need updated financial disclosures for our annual review. My hands shook now, not fear. Adrenaline. Recognition. 3 years ago, Apex was collapsing under pandemic pressure. Our credit wasn't strong enough to secure the construction financing. Blake had begged me. Not metaphorically. On his knees in this same parking lot, voice breaking. Just temporary, Vincent. You're saving 200 jobs. You're saving my legacy. I'll never forget this. At home, Anna had stared at me like I'd announced I was walking into traffic. House. Savings. Kids' college funds. Everything exposed. The loan officer's careful pause before I signed still lived in my memory. Mr. Kane, you understand this makes you personally liable for the full amount of Apex defaults? I understood. The guarantee was supposed to be replaced once Apex stabilized, corporate covenants, board-backed security. It never happened. Every time I brought it up, Blake offered the same soothing lie. Next quarter. We're almost there. 3 years of next quarter. I pulled the guarantee documents from my portfolio, scanning until my eyes found the clause my attorney insisted on, the one I insisted on: guarantor may revoke guarantee upon material change in employment status or fiduciary relationship with borrower. Blake had signed it without reading. He laughed when I asked, Vincent, you're never leaving. Stop being paranoid. My employment status just materially changed. The irony wasn't emotional. It was structural. I drove straight to Claire Winters instead of going home, gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened. Claire had handled my real estate investments for years. She knew I wasn't prone to drama. When she read the documents, her expression changed in stages: curiosity, shock, then something like careful respect. Vincent, she said, tapping the page, do you understand what this clause means? If you revoke the guarantee, the bank can call the loan immediately. The Wellington project is 60% complete, I said. There's no way Apex can refinance $47 million in current conditions, she replied. Rates are up. Construction lending is tight. And if they're courting investors, their financials are already under scrutiny. She pulled up Apex's latest reports. Spreadsheets, debt schedules, projections. The numbers weren't just ugly, they were dependent. Dependent on Wellington continuing to release funds like oxygen. They've taken on 3 more major projects assuming Wellington revenue will fund them, Claire said. If funding pauses, they can't make payroll past 60 days. I watched rain streak down her office window, the lines merging and splitting like timelines. What happens if I do nothing? I asked. Her answer was clean, clinical. You remain personally liable. If the project fails for any reason, delays, overruns, market shift, they come after your assets. Your house. Retirement. Everything. You'll be financially destroyed. She leaned forward slightly. Vincent, you're not just a guarantor. You're the keystone. Pull yourself out, and the whole arch collapses. Blake had treated me like dead weight. But the bank had treated me like the foundation. I returned Laura Bennett's call from my car, the rain still turning the world outside into blurred shapes. She answered on the second ring, voice bright and routine, like she was ticking through a checklist. Mr. Kane, thank you for calling back. We just need updated financials for our quarterly review, standard procedure for personal guarantors. My tone stayed steady. Laura, there's been a material change. I was terminated from Apex Construction today. My employment ended at 4:30. Silence. Then papers rustling. Keyboard clicking. Her friendliness evaporated into protocol. Mr. Kane, your guarantee is tied to your fiduciary capacity at Apex. Are you saying you no longer hold a position of authority? As of 4:30, that's correct. A heavier silence settled in, the kind that signals internal alarm bells. I need to escalate this immediately, she said. Risk management will contact you within 24 hours. Please don't take action on the guarantee without speaking to us. She hung up abruptly. I sat still and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger. Not vindication. Power. Not the loud kind. The kind that comes from holding the document that decides whether an empire continues breathing. Before I could process it, my phone rang again, Nathan Fisher, Apex's CFO. His voice was tight, panicked. Vincent, what the hell did you just do? The bank called asking about your employment and the personal guarantee. Blake is losing his mind. What's happening? Blake thought he'd fired an employee. He'd actually triggered a financial reflex. Nathan met me early the next morning in a coffee shop that smelled like burnt espresso and sleep deprivation. He looked wrecked. Dark circles under his eyes. Hands trembling as he stirred sugar he didn't seem to taste. Blake fired you without telling me, he said fast. Without telling senior leadership. HR confirmed it after you were already gone. Vincent, I need you to understand, this is catastrophic. He laid it out like a man watching a ship sink in slow motion. Apex had $12 million in operating cash, until you counted obligations. $34 million in near-term expenses across active projects. Payroll. Subcontractors. Materials. Permits. Insurance. The Wellington loan is oxygen, Nathan said. Funds release in tranches. It's scheduled into everything. If the bank calls it, we can't cover $47 million. We halt projects. Lay off 70%. Chapter 11 within 90 days. 200 people lose their jobs. I sipped my coffee and let him talk until his panic ran out of words. Why did Blake fire you? I asked, even though I suspected. Nathan looked away, ashamed. Kyle convinced him you were too conservative. Too slow. Blake wants to impress investors. Kyle's been calling you old guard for months. Then Nathan slid a folder across the table, lowering his voice. I shouldn't show you this. But you deserve to know. Printed emails. Blake and Kyle planning my termination like an operation. Subject line, clearing out the old guard. Deadweight. Dinosaur. Risk-averse fossil. The final email from Blake, dated 3 weeks earlier: once Vincent is gone, we can finally run this company like it's 2024, not 1994. The investors will love it. I closed the folder. This wasn't impulse. It was intent. And intent has consequences. I went home and told Anna everything. She didn't cry. Not at first. She went still, like her mind was running through scenarios faster than her body could react. Then the anger came, sharp, controlled, pointed. He fired you while your name is still on that guarantee? She asked. Yes. Fear followed, quieter but heavier. She knew what the guarantee meant in practical terms. Our house wasn't just a house anymore. It was collateral. Our savings weren't savings. They were an unsecured cushion waiting to be seized. Then she did something that surprised me. She became analytical. What are you going to do next? I opened my laptop at the dining room table and did what I've always done when systems start failing. I built documentation. I created a timeline of my 15 years at Apex: crises managed, overruns prevented, contracts saved, clients retained. Emails where Blake praised my caution when it protected his image. Performance reviews that called me indispensable in nicer language. Reports that showed how many disasters never happened because I didn't let them. Then I built a second document, one I hadn't needed before. A financial exposure model. If Wellington stalled, funding tranches froze. Subcontractors stopped. Payroll missed. Chapter 11 appeared like a scheduled milestone. While cross-checking expense summaries, I noticed irregularities that didn't match the construction sequence I knew intimately. Consulting line items. Vague descriptions. Payments broken into chunks just under review thresholds. $4.2 million to Hendricks Strategic Partners. I ran a registry search. Registered agent, Kyle Hendricks. Blake's nephew. That wasn't modernization. That was extraction. Monday morning arrived like a controlled burn that jumped the line. My phone started buzzing at 7:30. Texts from my former team, people who had never needed to sound desperate before. The project management system was locked. Nobody could access critical files. The master admin credentials weren't in the IT documentation because there had never been a need to document them. I had been the solution built into the system. 2 major deadlines were scheduled this week. Miss them and penalties trigger automatically, real dollars, not internal reprimands. Kyle, now titled Director of Project Operations, had sent an email telling everyone to stop relying on old frameworks and be agile. He wrote it like the word itself could replace 15 years of infrastructure. By noon, 3 project managers called my personal phone. I let each call go to voicemail. Not out of cruelty. Out of distance. The difference mattered. By 2, the Wellington Street site supervisor called. His voice was tight enough to snap. Vincent, the city flagged the permit update. Kyle changed specifications. The inspector says the permit may be invalid. I checked the city portal from my laptop. I was still listed as the principal agent on the permits. City code required a master builder certification for developments over 20 million. My certification was the anchor point. Kyle didn't have one. Without it, the permit wasn't just delayed, it was defective. Construction legally could not continue. Every day of delay cost roughly $50,000. Blake's plan depended on speed. Regulation depends on qualification. And the system doesn't negotiate. Tuesday morning, a certified letter from First Continental Bank landed on my kitchen counter like a weight. Material change clause invoked. Immediate review scheduled for Friday. They requested updated company financials, detailed explanation of leadership change, and proof Apex could continue servicing debt without my personal guarantee. The language was clinical. Cold. The kind of tone banks use when they've already begun planning contingencies. A second letter was addressed to Apex, with me copied, notice of potential default review. Those 4 words would be detonating somewhere behind Blake's office door right now. I forwarded both letters to Claire. Her reply came back fast. They're positioning for a call. Do not contact the bank again without counsel. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. That evening, there was a knock at my door. Not the doorbell. A deliberate knock, careful, measured, like whoever was outside didn't want neighbors listening. I opened the door and saw no one. Only an envelope on the welcome mat. Plain. No return address. Inside was a cheap prepaid phone and a typed note, turn this on at 8 p.m. You're not the only one who knows what Blake is hiding. Anna's face went pale. This is insane. Call the police. I didn't. Not yet. At exactly 8 o'clock, the burner rang. A young woman's voice, fast and shaking. Mr. Kane. My name is Sophie Morgan. I work in finance at Apex. I need to tell you something before they destroy you. Sophie spoke like she was afraid the air itself might report her. I have access to the real books, she said. Not the investor version. The real numbers. She explained that Wellington wasn't merely behind schedule. It was over budget by $8 million. To hide it, expenses were being shifted to other projects. Revenue projections inflated. Contracts backdated. Phantom invoices created to cover gaps. Kyle's consulting company, Hendricks Strategic Partners, billed $4.2 million for services that never happened. No deliverables. No reports. Just invoices Blake approved. I asked the question that mattered. Why are you telling me this? Her voice cracked. Because I heard Blake tell Kyle that if the bank audits, they're blaming you. They're building a paper trail right now. Then she said the sentence that changed the shape of the situation. They forged your electronic signature on approvals. 3 contracts. It makes it look like you authorized payments to Kyle's company. Anna grabbed my arm so hard her nails pressed through my sleeve. Sophie sent encrypted files while we were still on the phone. I watched them download, budget tables, wire records, internal emails. Then the email that made my stomach go cold. From Blake to Kyle, dated 2 weeks before my firing, if the bank audits us, we point everything at Vincent. He was project lead on Wellington. Make sure the paper trail leads to him. They weren't just removing me. They were positioning me as the fall guy. I sat very still, because stillness is what you do when you realize the danger is no longer theoretical. This wasn't betrayal. It was premeditation. Claire reviewed Sophie's files the next morning and didn't waste time pretending it was manageable. She brought in a forensic accountant and a white-collar defense attorney. The room shifted from legal consultation to incident response. This is beyond a loan guarantee, Claire said. They're setting you up for fraud. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. Possibly securities issues if investors are involved. Patricia Oakes examined the forged approvals like a surgeon. These signatures are deliberate. Sophisticated. That helps you. It indicates intent and planning. You don't accidentally create this trail. We built a strategy. I would attend the Friday bank meeting as scheduled. I would not revoke the guarantee yet, that was the nuclear option. Instead, I would inform First Continental that there were significant irregularities requiring immediate investigation. That would trigger their due diligence protocols and establish me as the party disclosing risk, not hiding it. We move first, Patricia said. First mover becomes whistleblower. Second mover becomes suspect. As we finalized the plan, my phone rang. Blake Hendricks. I answered on speaker. His voice was different now. Careful. Controlled. Almost polite. Vincent. I think we moved too fast. There may have been miscommunication. Let's discuss bringing you back as a consultant. Good money. Flexible terms. You'd basically be your own boss. Then, softer, the bank is asking questions. It would help if you smoothed things over. For old time's sake. For old time's sake. The phrase was supposed to trigger nostalgia. It triggered clarity. I let the silence stretch. All right, Blake, I said. We'll talk. Then I added, evenly, my attorney will be present. The silence on his end wasn't surprise. It was fear trying to hide inside professionalism. I agreed to meet Blake the next morning at Claire's office. Neutral ground. Cameras in the lobby. Receptionist logs. Everything recorded by default. If Blake wanted a private conversation, he'd chosen the wrong setting. He arrived with his own lawyer, Porter, a thin man with anxious eyes who kept adjusting his tie like it was choking him. Blake walked in first, wearing his best confidence, but it faded the moment he saw who was already seated at the table. Claire. Patricia Oakes, white-collar defense. Howard Chen, forensic accounting. 3 quiet professionals with files open and pens ready. Blake tried charm anyway. Vincent, we built Apex together. I made a mistake. Kyle pushed too hard. Let's fix it, come back. Name your price. I stayed still. Hands folded. Let his voice fill the room until it ran out of air. Claire spoke, calm and professional. Mr. Hendricks, my client is concerned about financial irregularities on the Wellington project, including invoices totaling millions paid to Hendricks' strategic partners and approvals bearing forged signatures. Blake's smile faltered. Porter leaned forward. That's a serious allegation. Do you have evidence? Claire slid a folder across the table. Not dramatic. Just deliberate. Porter opened it and read in silence. His face shifted, confusion, then recognition, then controlled alarm. He looked at Blake, and for the first time I saw something close to fear cross Blake's eyes. We need a recess, Porter said quickly. Claire nodded. Before they stood, she added one sentence that changed Blake's posture entirely. Mr. Kane is obligated to disclose this to First Continental on Friday unless resolved beforehand. Bank disclosure. Investigation. Enforcement. The room went quiet in a different way. They returned from the hallway 15 minutes later. Blake's tie was loosened. His jaw clenched hard enough to show strain in his cheeks. The confidence was still there, but it had become defensive, the kind of confidence people use when they're trying to convince themselves. What do you want? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I wanted drama. Because timing matters. Silence forces clarity. 3 conditions, I said finally. First, an independent forensic audit of Wellington. Not internal review. Not your people. A third party with full access, contracts, payments, approvals, everything. Blake stared, calculating. Second, full restoration of my employment with back pay and a written acknowledgement that my termination was in error. Public, internal communication. My reputation is not negotiable. Porter's pen stopped moving for a fraction of a second. Third, I continued, Kyle Hendricks removed from any financial decision-making. No approvals. No budget authority. No vendor relationships. Blake exploded out of his chair. Kyle is family. You can't demand I fire my nephew. This is extortion. Claire didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Mr. Hendricks, Mr. Kane can revoke his personal guarantee today. He can also disclose evidence of forged approvals and fraud to the bank Friday morning. Those outcomes are not theoretical. Blake's anger stalled. Porter touched his arm, a warning. Blake paced once, then sat back down, eyes hard. I'll agree to an audit. I'll bring Vincent back as COO. Kyle moves out of finance. But he stays employed. I nodded. Add one more term, I said evenly. If the audit confirms fraud, all responsible parties resign. Including you. Blake's stare sharpened. I held it. Grant and Associates arrived Monday like a controlled invasion. 6 auditors. Laptops. Scanners. Rolling cases. People trained to treat documents the way surgeons treat tissue, carefully, methodically, without sentiment. Blake sent a company-wide email framing my return as a strategic realignment. The wording was polished, but the panic underneath showed through. Within an hour, my old team started appearing at my office door, one by one, with relief they didn't try to hide. We've been drowning, a project manager admitted. Kyle keeps saying to move faster. He doesn't know where anything is. Kyle was reassigned to business development. No direct reports. No approval authority. A title created to avoid the word demotion. The auditors started with Wellington and quickly found the pattern, invoices that didn't match physical progress. Vendors with vague addresses. Payments split into amounts just under review thresholds. Consulting fees with no deliverables, no reports, no traceable work product. On day 3, Victoria Stone, lead auditor, asked for a private conversation. Mr. Kane, this isn't sloppy accounting, she said. It's structured. Deliberate. Multiple mechanisms running at once. That afternoon, Kyle didn't show up. His desk was cleared. Laptop missing. Personal items gone. Blake claimed a family emergency. Sophie texted me from the restroom. Kyle's wife posted an airport selfie. Cayman Islands. One way. Flight matters. It turns suspicion into urgency. Fraud becomes a timeline. And timelines attract federal attention. Victoria requested bank records. Wire logs. Vendor contracts. The room temperature in the building shifted as people realized the audit wasn't symbolic. It was forensic. Friday's bank meeting wasn't a meeting. It was a review board. First Continental's risk management team filled the conference room, Laura Bennett plus executives I'd never met. The regional VP, Charles Whitmore, sat at the center with quiet authority. Silver hair. No wasted motion. A man who had watched companies collapse without changing his tone. They had binders in front of them. Apex's filings. Project updates. News articles. Even my professional history. Mr. Kane, Whitmore began, we understand you were terminated, then rehired. We also understand an independent forensic audit is underway. Explain what's happening. Claire nodded once. I spoke. I didn't speculate. I didn't accuse. I delivered facts, financial irregularities, forged approvals, audit engagement, corrective actions initiated, cooperation expectations. Whitmore listened like he'd already decided what he believed. When I finished, he slid a document across the table. We will keep the Wellington loan active under a revised structure. One condition is non-negotiable. Your employment becomes a covenant of the loan. If you leave Apex again for any reason, voluntary or involuntary, we call the note immediately. The sentence landed with the weight of a lock clicking shut. They weren't tying the loan to Apex's leadership. They were tying it to me. Claire spoke carefully. This makes Mr. Kane essential to loan stability and oversight. It also concentrates risk on his employment status. Whitmore didn't blink. We trust Vincent Kane, he said. We do not trust Blake Hendricks anymore. It wasn't personal. It was institutional, and it meant the real power shift had already occurred. Claire requested a private conference in the hallway before I answered. This gives you leverage, she said quietly. Blake can't fire you without collapsing the financing. But it also binds you. The bank is turning your presence into infrastructure. Howard, the forensic accountant, added, it's a risk control mechanism. They're making you the stabilizing variable. I understood the advantage immediately. I also understood the cost. If I stayed, I controlled the outcome. If I left, the company collapsed, and with it, 200 jobs, dozens of subcontractors, years of work. Even if I wanted to walk away, the guarantee had already made that impossible without casualties. Back in the room, every bank executive watched me. I'll agree, I said slowly, with modifications. Board approval for any major financial decision. Written operational authority. Documented non-interference clauses. And a clear exit pathway. Once Wellington is completed, irregularities resolved, and my personal guarantee replaced by standard corporate covenants, I can resign without triggering a loan call. Whitmore exchanged glances with his team. And if Blake Hendricks undermines this structure, he asked. I didn't hesitate. Then you call the loan immediately, I said. And I will assist you in asset recovery. It wasn't a threat. It was alignment of incentives. Whitmore nodded once. Agreed. The bank drafted the revised covenant the same day. By evening, Apex's board had been notified that governance was being restructured around one conclusion: Vincent Kane was now the safest part of the company. And Blake Hendricks was not. The bank's covenant triggered something Blake hadn't anticipated. Within 48 hours, Apex's board called an emergency session. I wasn't invited initially. I was discussed. Blake presented it as a temporary optics issue. The bank overreacted. It's procedural. We'll stabilize once Wellington finishes. But Whitmore had already sent a memo to the board, loan continuation contingent upon governance restructuring. That language wasn't optional. 3 board members requested access to the audit's preliminary findings. Victoria Stone delivered them directly. Structured irregularities. Forged approvals. Related party payments to Kyle's firm. No supporting documentation. By the end of the meeting, the board made 2 decisions. First, Blake was placed on administrative leave pending audit completion. Second, I was appointed interim chief operating officer with expanded authority over financial oversight until further notice. Blake called me that night. You're enjoying this, he said. No, I replied. I'm stabilizing what you destabilized. You think the board will protect you forever? They don't need to protect me, I said calmly. The bank does. He didn't respond immediately. Because that was the new reality. Power hadn't shifted emotionally. It shifted contractually. And contracts don't argue. Blake's leave was announced internally as a temporary strategic review. No mention of fraud. No admission of exposure. Corporate language is designed to reduce panic. But panic doesn't require transparency. Rumors move faster than emails. By midweek, subcontractors were calling directly, asking if Wellington funding was stable. Vendors wanted confirmation their payments would clear. Insurance brokers requested updated risk disclosures. The audit expanded beyond Wellington. Grant and Associates began reviewing 3 additional projects launched during the same period Kyle's consulting company received payments. The pattern repeated. Revenue inflated early. Costs deferred. Expenses shifted between divisions to create artificial margins. Victoria met me privately again. This wasn't opportunistic, she said. It was systemic. Multiple quarters. Structured intent. I nodded once. What's your estimate? If regulators become involved? 8 to 12 million in exposure. Possibly more if investor disclosures were misleading. That number didn't shock me. What mattered was containment. I implemented weekly financial transparency reports to the board and bank. No summaries. Full line item access. Shared dashboards. Zero filtering. When trust collapses, visibility replaces it. Late Friday afternoon, a federal subpoena request arrived, quiet, sealed, addressed to Apex Construction. Not dramatic. Just inevitable. The subpoena was narrow but pointed. Request for documents related to Wellington Street financing, vendor payments to Hendricks Strategic Partners, and executive communications tied to revenue reporting. Not a raid. Not yet, just document production. Claire coordinated immediately. We established a response team, preserved digital records, froze deletion protocols across company servers. No internal cleansing. No quiet corrections. Transparency was now strategy. Blake's attorney requested access to internal files. The board denied it pending investigation. Kyle's location became clearer. Cayman Islands. No return ticket. Financial activity traced through offshore accounts linked to Hendricks Strategic Partners. The forensic audit confirmed unauthorized transfers totaling $6.8 million beyond the initial $4.2 million already identified. Money routed through layered entities. Blake released a statement through his attorney denying knowledge of financial misconduct. That didn't change the email trails. Or the approvals. Or the structured timing of my termination. The board held another emergency meeting. One motion passed unanimously, Blake Hendricks removed permanently as CEO. Interim leadership structure formalized under my operational oversight and board supervision. No applause. No celebration, just controlled correction. That night, Anna asked me a simple question. Do you regret signing that guarantee 3 years ago? I thought about it carefully. No, I said. Because if I hadn't, this would have collapsed long before the truth surfaced. With Blake removed, the narrative shifted from defense to stabilization. Employees needed clarity more than reassurance. I held an all-hands meeting in the main project hall. No stage. No spotlight. Wellington continues, I said plainly. Funding remains active. Payroll remains intact. An independent audit is underway. We are cooperating fully with external review. No accusations. No speculation. Facts reduce fear more effectively than optimism. Questions followed. Direct ones. Are we going bankrupt? No. Is Blake coming back? No. Are we safe? Yes. Because we're addressing the problem, not hiding it. The bank released the next Wellington funding tranche after reviewing updated oversight structures. That signal mattered more than any internal memo. Subcontractors resumed normal timelines. Insurance carriers adjusted risk classification downward after governance changes were documented. Reputation doesn't recover instantly. It recalibrates through evidence. Sophie continued cooperating with investigators. Under counsel, she secured whistleblower protection. She met me once in person. I thought they'd ruin you, she admitted. They almost did, I said. But fraud relies on silence. You broke that. She didn't smile. She just nodded. By month's end, regulators formally opened an inquiry into Blake and Kyle's activities. Not Apex. Individuals. That distinction preserved the company. And shifted accountability precisely where it belonged. 3 months later, Wellington reached structural completion. Steel framing finished. Concrete cured. Inspections passed under renewed oversight. No inflated projections. No hidden invoices. The audit concluded with a final report exceeding 200 pages. Findings: 11 million misallocated through related party entities. Forged executive approvals. Misleading investor briefings. Intentional timing of my termination to redirect liability. The board referred the findings to federal authorities. Blake resigned from the board permanently. Kyle remained overseas. First Continental replaced my personal guarantee with structured corporate covenants backed by audited financials and new governance controls. The covenant tying my employment to the loan was amended. I was no longer the keystone. The system was. At the final board meeting of the quarter, Whitmore attended as observer. "You stabilized this faster than most firms survive similar exposure," he said. "It wasn't stabilization," I replied. "It was correction. There's a difference." When the meeting ended, I sat alone in the conference room for a moment. "Blake once told me loyalty doesn't pay bills." He was right. Loyalty doesn't. Integrity does. Credibility does. Documentation does. And when institutions decide who to trust, they don't choose volume. They choose consistency. I turned off the lights and walked out. This time, not as collateral, but as control. The federal inquiry moved slowly. That was expected. Document requests became depositions. Depositions became sealed motions. Blake hired new counsel. Kyle remained offshore but retained representation through an international firm. Apex itself was not charged. That distinction mattered. The Department of Justice focused narrowly on related party transactions, wire transfers, and falsified approvals. The forged signatures were verified by digital forensics, timestamp discrepancies, IP address mismatches, layered authentication trails. Blake's public statement shifted from denial to limited oversight failure. Language evolves when evidence accumulates. The board formalized governance changes permanently. Independent Audit Committee. Mandatory related party disclosure review. Executive termination protections tied to loan covenants. My personal guarantee was formally released. The bank replaced it with structured corporate security backed by audited financials and tightened oversight. The release document arrived via courier. I read it twice before signing. For 3 years, that guarantee had sat like a weight on my chest. Not because I feared risk, but because risk without transparency is blind. Now the risk was institutionalized. Contained. Blake's indictment was unsealed 2 weeks later. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. Securities misrepresentation. Kyle was named in the filing. The headline didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how little satisfaction I felt. Accountability isn't celebration. It's correction. And correction, when done properly, is quiet. The board asked me to consider a permanent role as Chief Operating Officer. Not interim. Permanent. The offer came with expanded authority over financial governance and reporting structures. I didn't answer immediately. Anna and I sat at the kitchen table that night, the same place I built exposure models months earlier. "You don't owe them," she said. "I know. You also rebuilt something that could have collapsed." That was true. But obligation and responsibility aren't the same. The next morning, I requested one amendment before accepting. Operational authority codified in bylaws. Board-level veto protection against unilateral executive termination tied to financial oversight. Written separation pathway once structural covenants fully mature. No more informal trust. Everything documented. The board agreed unanimously. When my appointment was announced, the response inside Apex was restrained but steady. No applause. No spectacle. Just alignment. Subcontractors adjusted credit terms favorably after governance improvements were published. Insurance premiums recalculated downward. Investors requested quarterly transparency briefings, which I implemented without resistance. Stability isn't dramatic. It's incremental. One correct decision layered over another. Sophie transitioned into a senior internal audit role. Protected. Valued. "You didn't have to bring me forward," she said once. "I didn't," I replied. "You brought yourself." Systems don't survive on heroes. They survive on people who refuse to look away. Wellington opened 6 months later. Ribbon cutting. City officials. Press cameras. Standard speeches about growth and resilience. I declined the podium. Elena Brooks, the newly appointed CEO after Blake's removal, handled the public narrative carefully. This project represents accountability and renewed governance, she said. Apex is stronger because we confronted our challenges directly. The phrasing mattered. Confronted. Not survived. After the ceremony, Charles Whitmore from First Continental approached quietly. You understand most companies don't recover from this, he said. Most companies hide it, I answered. He nodded once. Banks measure trust differently than employees do. Trust to a bank means predictability. We had rebuilt predictability. The forensic findings led to restitution proceedings. Asset freezes. Civil recovery actions. Apex recovered a portion of the diverted funds through structured settlements tied to seized accounts. Not all of it. But enough to close the loss without external bailout. The board implemented mandatory executive ethics certifications annually. No more related party ambiguity. No more unreviewed consulting entities. When Wellington's final numbers were published, profit margins were lower than Blake's projections, but accurate. Accuracy is less impressive in the short term. It's far more durable in the long term. Blake accepted a plea agreement 11 months after his indictment. Reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation and asset recovery. Kyle was extradited after negotiations through international counsel. Their names moved from business headlines to legal columns. I read the coverage once and closed the article. There was no triumph attached to it. Only consequence. At Apex, the governance framework we built outlasted the scandal. Quarterly independent audits became routine. Vendor vetting tightened. Compensation structures were redesigned to remove incentives tied solely to short-term projection inflation. The company's valuation stabilized within 18 months. Not because of aggressive growth. Because of restored credibility. One afternoon, an employee stopped me in the hallway. My dad worked here before I did, he said. He thought we were done when Blake left. Thanks for not walking away. I considered that for a moment. I didn't stay for Blake, I said. I stayed for the system. He smiled, not fully understanding. But that was fine. Leadership isn't about visibility. It's about continuity. When I finally refinanced our house on improved terms, without a personal guarantee attached, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not financial. Structural. 3 years after that conference room meeting, Apex's annual report included a section titled Governance Reform and Financial Integrity. My name appeared once. Not highlighted. Not celebrated. Referenced as part of structural correction. That was enough. Anna asked me recently whether I would sign that guarantee again, knowing what followed. I thought about Blake's smirk. The forged emails. The Cayman transfers. The subpoena. The bank covenant that tied my employment to survival. Then I thought about the employees who kept their jobs. The subcontractors who were paid. The investors who avoided collapse. I said. But I would also document differently. Protect differently. Structure differently. Loyalty doesn't pay bills. Blake was right about that. What pays bills is credibility backed by documentation. What protects companies is governance backed by enforcement. What protects individuals is clarity backed by preparation. When Blake fired me, he thought he removed caution. He actually removed insulation. And once insulation is gone, the system overheats. Correction isn't revenge. It's restoration of balance. That's what happened here. Not a takeover. Not a triumph. A recalibration. And recalibration, when done correctly, doesn't make noise. It makes stability. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or positioned as expendable, then you already understand the lesson beneath it. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate betrayal and hard-earned justice. If you found Vincent's journey compelling, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of people who refuse to be crushed by those who underestimated them. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or your own experiences with workplace loyalty and betrayal. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who need to hear them. Until next time, remember, document everything. Protect yourself first. And never let anyone convince you that your expertise is disposable.